Hey Nerdpreneurs! Frank and I went to Emerald City Comic Con. It's the first convention we've ever gone to, it's in Seattle, and we learned a ton that we want to share with you. If you like this show, hit follow in your podcast app and give us a good rating. Now here's today's Talking Nerdy.
Talking nerdy. We're just talking nerdy. With all this talking nerdy. Oh, come on, you wanna talk nerdy.
What are we talking about today?
Yeah, Emerald City Comic Con. You and I were there just a couple weeks ago, and there's a couple really interesting things I really wanted us to talk about in this. Not only some of the sales tactics, that was actually what you pointed out. You thought the sales tactics were super interesting. So I'll be curious to hear what you have to say about that and have some discussion around that. But I kind of just want to tell folks our story of this event, talk about the benefits that they might get from, hearing what a con is like, especially if they haven't been, or if they haven't been to Emerald City Comic Con, and some of the debate around whether cons are even worth it.
Is there a debate around that?
Yes.
Okay.
Some of the stuff I've been finding, there are businesses that say, you know what, the hassle of going to a convention is so great. The money, the time, because when you go back home afterwards, you're drained and you have to finally catch up on everything, but also just the costs are
And
huge.
this is for people who are working the shows and actually setting up booths, the nerdpreneurs of them, right?
Yeah, people who have to prepare, even cosplayers are a great example.
Right. So, because I feel like there's no doubt in our mind that going to a con without a business objective is completely a waste of time, right?
Totally.
Because I don't know. We went there and we basically just did the business thing. And
Yes.
I don't know that I had any interest in any of the other stuff. We were dressed up, cosplaying as ourselves, as successful podcasters, I think, actually. We were cosplaying as that. And then there were a lot of people who didn't get the cosplay. I think most people were looking for anime style, or they were looking for some form of comic book cosplay, we saw a lot of that.
It took a lot of work to convince people, or get them to understand, not even convince, just get them to recognize what we were doing.
We were a successful and very ambitious podcast, and people were like, I love your costume. It's like, actually, it's not a costume. We're kind of going places. We're just here. It's like, yeah. And, but it was funny, is people would ask us, oh, what is Nerdpreneur? Oh, I love that. Keep it nerdy, right? People were
we had shirts
about
on
that.
By the way, for the listener that doesn't know, we had shirts on that are our new creation, which was a bit of a hassle in itself just to get these shirts made.
Don't buy local. That was the lesson.
That's so unfortunate. I really wanted to support local, and they just...
If you live in Seattle, do not support local.
It was bad.
No.
Essentially, the shirts came out the wrong color, and there was no heads up. When I got there, he said, you know what, this yellow doesn't show up on black. I was like, that would have been great to know before we began this. And then they stamped it out in a way that was just really ugly. It was a giant square for the entire piece of art.
It wasn't what we saw.
That was going to happen. It wasn't what we saw.
That's all it came down to. They promised one thing, and when we showed up to pick up the shirts, those shirts were not what we were offered.
It was not at all.
Not even close.
And the guy was still very determined that he was right. And that was tough. That was really tough.
It was the Tinder date of buying t-shirts. We absolutely showed up, and it was not what we expected.
Yeah, exactly. That's a good way to look at it. So after the Tinder date of shirts, we finally got it sorted out through a giant national corporation. Thank you to that giant national corporation that does not need sponsorship of any kind right now.
There's a reason they're more successful than these local shops.
Yeah, it turns out they've got a good machine.
Yeah, and a good product and a promise, and they deliver on it. Capitalism works, man.
Given that you and I are such big fans of supporting small businesses and nerdpreneurs and entrepreneurs, it was such a bummer that it turned out to be so disappointing.
Outside of t-shirts, we actually did get to this con. This is my first con
we
ever.
Did make it.
I've never been to one before. As I said, I consider them basically a waste of time, but now I'm professionally in the industry that requires me to go to cons and meet nerdpreneurs.
I'll be very curious, Chris, some of your outlooks on these things, because cons can be quite overwhelming, stimulatingly, visually overstimulating, I find. And PAX was another one I went to that was one of my first ones, and that was super
Is that
overwhelming.
like, are you referring to just like the amount of people who are dressed up in costumes, or like the amount of skin showing, or just the amount of people that are there,
Oh,
or
I
like the
see.
different colors of like just the flashing lights? And
So yeah, it's the colors, it's the there, sometimes it's the lights if it's dark enough and there's flashing lights. It's all the products, it's all the people. That's usually what it is to me. It's all of the activities and events you can be a part of, whether it's panels or celebrity events or fun activities and games. One of the things I really want to establish in this story that will have important nuggets in it is that
will it? I don't know,
I
man.
think it will. Well, you know what? Maybe it won't. But I do think that there are some points that I want to bring up. The Chris busts down to Seattle and he gets off the bus and we meet up and he's clearing his throat and he says, I'm recovering from an illness. And I was like, okay, yeah, that happens. He says it's like been about 3 weeks. And I was like, well, that sucks, but totally understand it. And then, we go out to dinner, we go see Dune 2. We we
Ooh, Dune 2. We got to talk about that.
we will talk about Dune 2. And then, we have our meeting to talk about what our priorities are for the con. And then the next day comes around and Chris is just sick. Like he is full on, like he's got mucus. He's fairly tired. And throughout the day, I can easily see his energy, waning, waxing away.
I think the sweat on my brow was the biggest indication. It's like, why do you look like you've
Why do you
just,
look like you ran
or
a mile?
why are you just like you got out of a pond or something? You you look clammy. Um,
Yeah,
yeah, I have
it
the skin
was
of a frog.
it
I
was
was,
rough. And
yeah,
and
yeah,
I mean, there was a point Chris and I were walking around, we were talking to people, talking a good deal, and you
shaking
know
hands,
shaking hands,
hugging,
sharing
kissing. No,
spittle. Yep.
no.
And at the end of it, we split up and we were checking out separate things. And I'm checking in with you, Chris, a little bit over text, and you're saying I'm on the fourth floor, sitting down, taking a break. I'm like, oh shit! Like, poor guy is just beat up. So out of all of that, there is. I think that context is kind of helpful as we go and explain the story because you stuck with it. So that's hats off to you. I probably would have bowed out like after several hours of this, just been like, man, I feel like shit. I really should not be here. I'm going to get out of here. But you stuck through it. You pulled all the energy you had.
Hey, sometimes you gotta play hurt. It was important, and I also felt like when you're going through, you only got one shot at really going to this con, and I was already there. Like, what am I gonna do? Just
Right.
hang out at your house? No. So you got to push it through, make it happen. But I will say, I didn't push for hardly anything to happen as far as content, or as far as all the plans and ideas that I had around, like, oh, we're going to do this, we're going to interview people, we're going to do all this. None of that happened. And I know my energy level was a factor in that, because usually I would be like, no, 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 let's do this, or let's get someone on camera, let's interview these people. And I was just so out of it that I felt like not pushing anything forward. Even holding the camera
I
was
think
like a lot.
so.
So,
You're touching on one of the things that I wanted to talk about that's really useful for anyone planning to go to a con, which is having a goal when you go. So, first off, I should also clarify a little bit. This is a topic I think that's essential for anybody going to a con, but especially people that are entrepreneurs or nerdpreneurs that are going with an intent around selling products, networking, doing research on competition, doing research on other ideas out there. And if maybe you're in the early ideation phase, just seeing what cons are like, even. There's so much value that doesn't actually get talked about a lot on the business side of cons because cons are so busy marketing themselves to the customers, to the masses that just want to buy product, not people who are looking to someday make product, even. So, super valuable going to a con. Doesn't matter really which one. I don't think, con, expo, whatever you want to call it. Now, for you and I, the day before when we were having dinner, we talked about some of our priorities. For me, my priority, and since I had gone the year before, I kind of knew what to expect. So my priority was just, I want to meet nerdpreneurs. I knew that going there, I'm going to talk to people. I'm going to have some nerdy conversations. And maybe even I'll promote my photography and video side hustle that I'm doing on the side. Like that was kind of a secondary. And your goals, do you remember what they were?
I think that one was I wanted to meet nerdpreneurs. Yeah, I wanted to
Mm-hmm.
actually meet the people who were running businesses and had successful businesses in nerdy markets. So that was one. Networking, I guess you could call it. The second thing I believe was to make and craft content around the actual event. And the other one I think was just to have fun with you, right? And to
Yes.
enjoy the process of actually going to a con with a friend of mine and kind of experience and have a good time. That was my main three objectives.
Yeah, and I think so the reconnect and like have fun was another really great point. If dear listener, you are doing business with other people or you have an accountability buddy, then
Accountability buddy.
accountability buddy, then go with them. And it's not only a fun place to do business research, it's also a fun chance for you to just hang out with people and people that you already get along with. Because the social aspect with strangers can be very draining. So going with someone you know does make it easier. Because having gone by myself, I will say I did not last the entire day when I went by myself because it was so exhausting and overwhelming. But this time with Chris, we were able to bounce off each other when we talked about the podcast. We were able to like talk each other up, ask questions that we both really wanted to know the answers to. It was good.
I would say we had fun.
I definitely had
I
fun.
think I would say, I mean, my day was overall not that fun, but I would
Right.
say I had fun considering the state I was in. And I would also say that the people we met were really cool. We actually met
Mm-hmm.
quite a few. I mean, we have, I don't know, over a dozen or more different business cards of people that said, yes, we would be willing to come on the podcast or chat with us about it or go deeper into a conversation. And so that's pretty cool. There was definitely interesting businesses there. What I expect. Hey, Nerdpreneurs, I don't know if you're aware of this, but if you're listening to this and you listen to our interview with Satine Phoenix, that interview was a really fascinating interview, but had a huge fallout online. In fact, there was a bunch of Twitter nerds that really got mad at us for just talking to her. You might not be aware, but some of them decided to go and give us a bad rating on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. So if you're one of our listeners that actually likes what we're doing and wants to support us, go give us a 5-star rating or review on Spotify or Apple Podcasts, wherever you're listening to this. It helps the pod out more than you know, and the bigger the pod gets, the bigger our guests will get. We're all in this together. Thanks again for listening. Now back to the episode. Was there any surprising businesses that you were like, oh, that's kind of neat or different? Because what I'm talking about is we all expected to see artists. We all expected to see somebody doing clothing and that kind of thing, right? We
Mm-hmm.
all expected to see people who are selling, um, you know, like memorabilia or comics or things like that, right? We all expected the people to be selling nerd culture things. But was there anything there that was surprising to you? And you were like, oh, wow, this is weird.
I think the things that did surprise me was there's two categories. There's the, oh wow, I didn't expect that this would be made this well. I didn't expect to see somebody making something to this level of quality. And I'm really impressed and I really want to buy it. And I did several times. The other thing that surprised me was how many similar products are out there. And I'm just going to name one of them, which is dice trays, dice towers, wooden dice holders, anything dice related. There were a lot. There was at least 5 vendors, and we may interview one of them. They were like the first people we spoke to. They were super nice, husband and wife duo. And they had something kind of unique on their product, which I thought was really fun. But pretty much a lot of the other people were either getting it from overseas or they were just making the same exact looking product. And that we saw that not just in that, genre, but in a lot of other things. It was just a lot of like, okay, same thing. Here we go.
Yeah, lots of minis, right? Lots
Mhm.
of people who were selling dice or dice affiliated products. There were some people selling clothing, which was nice. I didn't
Engraved
expect.
mugs and engraved like coasters. Saw a
Yeah,
good deal of that stuff.
lots of wood with some form of etching, laser engraving, or something like that. Lots of that. I thought it was weird, but hot sauce was its own category,
I
which is
Yes.
weird. But I gotta say, like, I didn't expect it going into a con about nerd stuff that there would be not one, not two, but like multiple hot sauce booths. It turns out everyone everywhere likes hot sauce. So especially even nerds. And if they labeled them a little bit nerdy in their label, you could absolutely sell your hot sauce
Yes.
at the ECC con.
That was actually one of the more surprising events. I don't know if you want to share that story so much, but it was just surprising how quickly they were selling out.
Well, one guy, we got his last bottle of hot sauce. Now that could also be a great sales tactic to just be like, you have nothing left, basically, and you just keep bringing one out.
Yes.
And it's like, oh, I got one left. I mean, honestly, that's a great tactic on the last day, right? And you would
Hmm.
definitely sell a bunch of them. So maybe that's what happened. But either way, I feel great. I got the last bottle of hot sauce
The
from this
very
guy.
last one, it was
Yeah.
really funny. I thought it was hilarious. I didn't want any, so I didn't care. But I
Hmm.
just thought it was so funny how, like, wow, we walked up and we got his attention with his last bottle.
Hmm.
Surprising.
There was booty shorts, which I didn't understand. I didn't expect. It was like
Yeah.
underwear, basically, but you could have whatever phrase of nerdy thing you want on it. It was almost like this crossover between like dirty thoughts and nerddom. And
Hmm.
so and you can put it onto these shorts for men or women, and they would just like say, all right, mix and match, what color, what this, and then stamp it out. That was a little surprising. I mean, it's still clothing, but it was like, oh, they're making it right here. That's a kind of cool idea. And they actually had two booths in two different
That's
locations, so
great.
it tells me that they clearly sell a lot of these shorts, and it was a successful business.
Yeah, they were there last year too. I think they had two booths as well. I would not be surprised if they are a regular.
Yeah, they were called Pixel That Punderwear, in case you're wondering. That was an interesting one to
It's a
be
good
there.
name.
You actually bought something from another place, which was the Hero Within
Yes.
clothing line, and specifically the guy who was there, Chief Nerd Tony, was selling clothing that was Star Trek related. And I remember walking by and be like, "You tried on one," and I was like, "Dude, that looks pretty good. You should get it."
Yeah, you said it. And then I sent a photo to Tanya and she's like, "Oh my gosh, that looks great. Are you going to get it?" And I was like, "I don't know." And she said, "You really should." Well, I ordered it, haven't gotten it yet, but it's a screen accurate away team jacket from Strange New Worlds, Star Trek Strange New Worlds, which is my favorite one of the series now. So I had to.
And Tony, the guy who runs it, also agreed to do an interview with us. And he's been doing this for a long time. Sounds like his story is really cool. And he goes to all sorts of cons all over, making various types of clothing from not just Star Trek, but Star Trek is one of his bigger sellers. And when we actually get that, so we know he's not just scamming Frank out of whatever he spent on that
God, I
jacket.
hope not.
As long as that jacket shows up, we're going to
Yeah.
jump on and get him on the pod.
Yeah, I wanted to also circle back just briefly around your one of your primary goals was to make content, and it didn't end up going. I mean, we you primarily did make some content that we posted on Instagram, but due to just low energy levels and various things, it it didn't pan out the way that I think you wanted. And I
No, not at
was,
all. I had no
yeah.
energy.
So tell
Yeah.
me a bit about like some lessons and or how you would do it differently, and now that you know more, like what would you expect going into it?
Well, I mean, we have all the content materials. We had all the stuff to do it. We had the mics. We had the gimbal. We had the camera set up. Like everything was good. We were dressed to do it. I just didn't have the energy. So the biggest thing I would change is not be sick, and
Yeah.
ideally, be in 100%. But you know what I would have liked to have done though is I would have liked to have done a bit with people. I just want to share with you sort of my thinking because I kept
Hmm.
thinking of ideas before, but like I couldn't remember them while we were there because I was sick. And now as I'm here and I'm looking back on it, I keep on thinking, oh, this would have been cool to do. So as we met up with people, just saying like, hey, can we do a quick interview? It takes like under a minute or something like that. And really, we're just going to ask you, what is your nerdy passion, as we interview all these different people, right? And so what we would do is we would do a quick film. And what I think would be funny is I rap the song right before we start. Not the whole song, but just our intro, like Nerdpreneur, you know, I love my work. Life's a game, so I'm gonna take my turn. Nerds deserve to put their passion first. Let them rap a verse so they can all be heard. And then we put the mic in their face and be like, right? What is your nerdy passion? And then but don't warn them I'm gonna rap. Just do it like
stun them.
Exactly. And then and see what happens. It's kind of a man on the street, woman on the person on the street idea. But then first off, they're not going to forget us if we do that.
Yeah.
And then two, we ask them, what is your nerdy passion? And then they'll say it, and then they might do something funny too, and we can roll with it, right?
Yeah.
And so I was thinking, like, if we did that with like 10 or 15 different people, we could either get some content that was each one of those would be funny, or maybe cut together a whole stream of them would be kind of fun. So people would wonder, oh, what is the next weird thing? Or how is the next person going to react? So I thought about that. And I didn't have the energy to be doing it every single time. And I didn't want to be like rapping and spitting on people in front of like all of that. But I feel like it would have been funny, and also could have got some attention for us at the actual con, where people would have been like, oh, that guy's rapping over there. So that might have been cool.
I like that idea. I wish we would have done that, but honestly, I think that's a great idea for the future for us to try. I also would love the idea if you're rapping, they're stunned.
Yeah.
3 seconds go by, and then we pull the mic away and say, "That's awesome."
Exactly, right?
Silent. Wow, what a real nerdpreneur. But then we'd have to be like, okay, no, sorry. Like, please go ahead. What's your nerdy passion? I don't want them to leave us thinking we're assholes.
No, but I feel like we could make some sort of fun content around that. And then what would have been interesting is, between your filming and, us being able to like, put people in interesting situations. I guess my ability to just like go with it and not give a crap would have been fun to do that. And then also get people to remember us afterwards too, and then be like, oh, that podcast sounded kind of fun, or I definitely won't forget this guy who interviewed me for like 2 seconds and rapped in front of me. Like, that would put us in their mind, so that when we followed up with them, it's like, hey, I'm the weirdo who rapped to you. And we tag them in our stories. So we tag each one. See, I did this a couple of times in our stories where I tagged a place where we were, and I was just kind of filming. And then I would have done that like 20 times. And then we got shared a couple of times, like Geekify, for example, reshared us and a few others. And it would have been a way to at least get recognized by other places. And then we could have been like, hey, Nerdpreneur is going around interviewing everybody at ECC, and possibly have gotten a little more trending in that category, right? And become known as like, oh, these guys go to cons and they interview on Nerdpreneurs. So, and do something fun like that. You get to share what your nerdy passion is. I think it would have been great if we'd have gone to each person and say, hey, what's one tip for coming to a con as a nerdy entrepreneur? And that's every great. Single one of them would have given us a nerdy tip. And then we could compile that into something, or we share all the ones in the story and then keep it and then cut it together as like a reflections. We could have asked them like 3 questions around something like that. And then we could have cut it together. Again, all this stuff's coming to me now after we've done it. And I've got full energy, and I'm creative again, and I'm willing to be excited about it. But at the time I was just like, keep talking, Frank. I don't know what's going on right now.
Just the fever sweats.
Yeah, I'm just like, whew, just
where's my water?
Yeah, just don't lose me in this crowd right now. I don't know where I'm going. There's a gigantic woman with a sword over there. There's like a clown who keeps looking at me weird. I don't know where that ogre's coming from.
Borderline acid trip at one of the worst places to have an acid trip.
Yeah. So that was a little bit of a challenge going through that day. But other than that, I mean, that's some of the ideas I had for what we could have done for content that just didn't come to fruition. But for a reason for us to go to another con, I really think it would be cool for us both to be 100% and be like, all right, this is what we're going to go do. And this is our promotion for the actual next one. And I think that might be a good idea for people when they go to a con, is like, if you're looking to do it business wise, or even if you're not there selling, how can you use the trending and the con and the connections to your advantage from a social media standpoint, right? I mean, tagging people, taking film, connecting with them, asking them questions, creating content around it. People want to spread the message of what they're doing, and in consequence will also spread what you're doing. And you'll attract people who are interested in what you're doing, because the crossover at these cons is your market, right? And that's the big thing that I like about it. Was this is a big, huge, like thousands and thousands of nerds. They may not be all one type of nerd and all your ideal client, but guaranteed in that thousands of nerd, you have some of your ideal client for your ideal thing that you're making at these cons.
Absolutely. And on top of that, if you start making content and tagging other businesses, maybe one of those 12 that you make free content for is going to resonate with what you are already doing as your own side project. And then you guys can become future accountability buddies, or maybe there's even an opportunity for a mentorship. I'm a huge fan of when you go, I mean, conferences are a little different and they're a bit more of like the B2B kind of world a lot of the time, but still mentorships are great in conferences, and maybe there's mentorship opportunities at a conference like this, a
Yeah, or
convention, sorry.
Yeah, or even just a chance to like talk to someone who's been doing these cons before and get a good conversation with them and say like, well, what did you learn that this is your first con? Or where did, what other cons have you done that were really great? Because the thing about this, I used to do trade shows in my old job. I hate trade shows, by the way. That's the other reason, but I hate them. But there is a system to it. When you get to know the other people who are also in the trade show circuit, you get to know what are the best ones to do, what are the ones you should avoid, what are the ones that really have done a great job promoting their stuff, and what are the other ones where they don't. Right now, ECC had huge traffic, and most of the people that we were talking to were like, it's good here. Yeah, it's really, we've done fairly well. I can't say that for all the artists, but I can say for a lot of the businesses downstairs, not in Artist Alley or whatever, I have a feeling like those people, who knows whether they did well or not, right? But I felt like there was a lot in there that I did not recognize or know anything about. And it's just like you're hoping that people will come up and be interested or potentially like your style or something. It feels like it's a lot harder if you're an artist. But I think if you have a niche and you're there, you're going to find that it was a lot of traffic and there's people spending money. Like everyone's got a bag of stuff. And
Mm-hmm.
so it's not a con where it's a bunch of just like, oh, we're just showing up and looking and doing cosplay. No, it's like they're out there to buy. Lots of people have buying power. So that's what I found at it. There's definitely trade shows like that where there are just people looking, and there's people who are buyers. And you want to be at those shows that they know bring in people who are willing to spend money on their hobby.
Yeah, I knew that this time going that I was going to spend money. I didn't know how much. I didn't really give myself a budget. I probably should have. It's like going to a casino. You kind of got to like set your limit for yourself and play within it. But I knew last year I did not expect to spend money. I just knew that I was going to go look, do some research for Nerdpreneur, meet some people. I left after spending like $150 the first time I went. This time I spent more than that. I spent a good amount of money on some small business nerdpreneurs. It was awesome. So I also wanted to talk a bit more about that sales side of things, because we've talked about marketing, how to use conventions for marketing purposes for your brand, for connecting with other people, how to network with other people, how to like whether it's mentorships or something else as far as networking. And I think it would be worthwhile for us to talk a bit about the sales side of it. Like what kind of influences did we feel being there as customers?
I mean, one of it is just the booths are nicely set up. Some of them had huge displays. Some of them relied more on the uniqueness of their product. Some of them had less unique products, so they had to be bigger with their messaging, right? And so maybe they had interactiveness, like, oh, you can come up and taste the hot sauce. That was a big draw for people to go up there and check it out. Or you can play with the model or check it out and feel it. Something that's tactile. So you have all those different things to entice people to your booth. So having a tactile element, a visual element, something that can actually, uh, you know, that makes you distinct, if that makes sense, right? Like you're unique in the space or different. And then I think also you just have to have like a welcoming atmosphere, if that makes sense too. There's generally very welcoming. Like I didn't feel like people were cold or anything, but I think that that's a component to it, is if you have really fun and friendly people who are outgoing and willing to engage people and make it non-threatening to go up and talk to you, then you are going to have a way better chance at selling something or getting a chance for people to check out your products and then getting a conversation, especially if you're selling something that costs a lot more money. Which wasn't a huge thing. It was, a pretty affordable, like most things seem to be pretty in the range of affordability.
Yeah, with few
Which is
exceptions to like
perspective.
some tapestry art, that was literally tapestry you put up on your wall that was, hundreds or thousands of dollars, or those minis that are massive that were hand painted, that
Yeah.
were, what did he say? It was Tiamat that
Yeah. Tiamat.
Tiamat kept getting painted by the same artist year after year, and they kept doubling the price every year to find the ceiling, and they're still trying to find the ceiling.
It sells out every time in the first like day. So
It's so cool.
it is one of those things that, you know, there is a high end market there, which is nice. But I think going to a con, know where your market is, right? Like, do you need to sell 5 sales to get a profitable show because you're selling tens of thousands of dollars items? So like, oh, I'm a comic book place, but I sell rare comic books. You need like 3 or 4 comics sold probably, and you're golden.
Right.
If you have a big show with like 10 sales, right? Whereas if you're like you were looking at that mini place, you want to have stuff for the low end, the medium end, and the high end, so you can capture all three markets, right? And understanding that you're going to need to have probably more of the cheap stuff in order to be able, but only one of the Tiamat, right? So
Mm-hmm.
it's like scarcity helps you sell that really expensive item.
Yeah,
Um,
having that involved element that you just mentioned a minute ago, whether it's having really cool art or eye candy that you can look at. I mean, there's a lot of that. There's a lot of great fine art that people put up. Unfortunately, in my opinion, I think it's kind of unfortunate there's so much of it. Even outside of Artist Alley, there's a lot of really high visibility, very bright colors that are being used, and there's a lot
mhm.
of horny art that is just like really, to me, I'm just like, as soon as I see like really thirsty art, I'm just like, nah, like I'm not even gonna look at your stuff. Like it just makes me feel dirty inside a little bit.
Nah.
And to the people who enjoy that, I'm not judging you. It's just my personal
Yeah, you got
thing.
to be careful what you say here.
Yeah.
I feel like you're alienating an entire thirsty generation of
There's
nerds who
it's
are walking through the con
yes.
looking for
They're
their
looking for the
next
thirsty art, and that's why
thirst trap.
on Artist Alley, there's like this pit of just all these comic book artists. And last year I went through, and I knew this year I wasn't going to bother, just because I'm not there for art. For people who are looking for art, it must be a gold mine because there's so much stuff there. But I saw enough my first year where I'm like, okay, I saw enough drawn boobies, butts, like giant muscles to get my fill for my lifetime. I'm good.
You know what I didn't see a lot of?
Ooh, what?
Dune,
That,
which was
yeah.
incredibly shocking to me as a
Given
business
same
person.
weekend as Dune 2 came out.
Dune 2 just dropped the same day as this con, and literally I bought, I think, everything that was Dune that was there, I found and bought.
Yes.
Like legit, there was no Dune art at all. If anyone had a sandworm, maybe it had already been sold, but we did go on the last day, so maybe some of it got sold already. But I'm just saying, if there was someone who had drawn a sandworm or some Fremen or some like Dune or Frank Herbert inspired art, I would have been all over that, because you got to believe there's some people who missed out on the opportunity to sell Dune art if they had just realized, oh, Dune comes out the same weekend as this, and it's going to be one of the largest sci-fi movies ever. It's like The Empire Strikes Back of Dune, right? Like that's what this was. So I was shocked. By the way, what I did wind up buying that was Dune was a coaster, like a
Yeah.
wooden laser etched coaster. There was one, and it said, fear is the mind killer, which is very cool. But it was the only thing I think I could find the entire con that was Dune related.
Yeah, I thought I had it rough because there was a limited amount of Star Trek stuff. But when we got to that coaster place, you were like, "Oh, Frank, like we were trying to get a certain number so we could get a deal. And you're like, Frank, while I'm talking to them, like, can you find any Dune stuff? And I was like, oh God, wow, poor Chris. He hasn't really found much Dune stuff this entire time, and
No, there
found
wasn't
that
even
one.
many people dressed in Dune. Actually, I
Right.
feel like it's maybe, I don't know. I feel like people don't like it as much as the people who do like it. You know what I mean? Like it's just I want it to be so much bigger than it is, and I'm worried that capitalism is forcing me to reevaluate my belief in this as an incredible genre, just because
Whoa,
it's
that's
not it.
interesting.
Well, it's like I really believe there's got to be a more of a market for people out there, because clearly the movie's done well, and the movie has got greenlit again, and all those other things that are big, and it should be one of the biggest movies out there. But I think I don't know, maybe there just isn't that level of, say, merchandise
I
people. There are people going after it.
I think you're right. I think there isn't as much of an opportunity on this particular IP, but I do think that there are places that are doing Dune stuff. We've seen more content come out for Dune, whether it's like reels that are, time specific and relevant, or as video games. There's that Dune Awakening game that you really you're trying to talk to those folks.
Yeah, trying to get them in. They're a long shot. They're over in Norway. Even if we schedule with
Oof,
them, they're going to be tough
that'll be
to
tough.
schedule. But
But
at
there's
the same time, they also have not been talking to anyone, because they don't even have a release date yet. So
Okay, so they're okay. That makes
yeah,
sense. But even another one that I saw that popped up on my social media was Displate. I think it's called. They
yeah,
they
display they do
they
that.
keep popping up for me, but there was a really cool one that they had of Paul silhouette, and then it like far ahead in front of him is the explosion of the
Hmm.
city. And I was like, that's epic. Like Chris would be into that.
Yeah, like there are so many great visuals from the movie too, and I guess maybe because it hasn't come out, there isn't many artists who have decided to tackle it yet. But when I think about that, I'm like, that would be so cool. Like, oh, this is just making me want to like
Get something
get an
commissioned.
artist. Yeah, I actually have an artist who would be, I think, perfect for this. She does iconic moments from TV
Oh yeah, you've
shows,
told me
nerd
about her.
culture. Yeah, she's great, and I do think she may listen to the pod, which is awesome if she does, because I've definitely seen her lurking our Instagram and hanging out around what we do, liking some of our stuff. But I just haven't asked her yet, because we've had so many great guests on, and we just have not had space yet. But um, I think commissioning a Dune custom piece would be really cool, and
Yeah.
maybe that's the route I go.
Ooh, yeah.
I need
Yeah.
something for over my bed. I'm not gonna lie. Now I want something subtler than just like a big, like, nerdy thing. I just don't want it to be super recognizable as a nerdy thing. But if it was like a subtle nod towards Dune and it
Yeah.
was something beautiful, it would be cool.
There's a lot of cool things you could do with that. You could do the moons, or actually, I think Arrakis is in a bi solar. What's it called? Two sun system.
Yeah, I think it's got two moons,
Oh,
actually,
okay.
but I don't know that. I know one of them is called the Hand of God or something,
Mm,
because it's got this weird like hand on it. The moons are very subtle. I would want something, maybe. I love deserts to begin with, so even
sure.
if it was some really cool desert art, or that explosion that happens at the end of Dune 2 would also be really cool. Can we just talk about Dune 2 since we're on this? And like, how
Sure.
was the movie for you the first time around? Because I'm seeing it again tonight.
So okay, I think it was I think it was so funny. So we get in there and we're in the back row, and because that was like the most center seating was in the back for you and I, and we got seated next to you. Pretty much were seated next to two really kind people on our left, and you're like chatting it up with them in the beginning. And while you're chatting with them, I'm sitting there thinking, this is supposed to be IMAX. Like this screen is big, sure, but it's not IMAX big. And I was like, maybe it's just we're in the back. And then literally 2 seconds later, you look over and you say the same thing. Is this IMAX? And I'm like, I don't know anymore. I
Yeah,
really don't know.
IMAX is a scam, everybody. I think that's what we learned, is that yes, it's technically bigger, but the theaters are bigger, so it depends on where you sit. So if you're in an IMAX theater and you sit at the back, it's no different than sitting at the back at a normal theater. It's
I
just same
think
perspective.
I think there's also some really dumb regulation around this, which is just, oh, okay, if you want to be considered IMAX, you have to have like a width of whatever it is, like, 70 feet. I don't know. I don't know what it is. And it's anything over 70 feet counts. So they just extend their screens like 2 feet and they're considered IMAX. But it's not like real IMAX where it's like 100 feet wide screen or something.
Yeah, exactly. And also IMAX is supposed to like loop around you and make you feel
Yeah, this
immersed
did
in it.
not.
Nothing like that. I felt like I was in a movie theater. I wasn't in the sand dunes of Arrakis.
Yes.
So
But
anyway,
the music, the audio was very good. I will
yeah,
say that. That was the one thing that they nailed. But at the same time, like, that's kind of the standard I feel like should be in a movie theater anyway.
the movie's great.
So yeah, as far as the movie goes,
The movie is great.
I very much enjoyed, I'm going to avoid spoilers here, but I very much enjoyed how they emphasized in this rendition of the movies of the screen adaptation, they emphasized a lot of elements that weren't there before. Like, for example, what happens to the mom? Like, I didn't realize that it was that heavy of a deal, which is why it was so big,
You're being so obtuse if you haven't seen the movie
You got to
that
see it
like
to understand.
yeah,
But
yeah.
they made the gravity of her situation palpable. Just really well done.
Yeah, and I also I it's there's so much opportunity for weird things in the movie to go poorly.
Yes.
There like Frank Herbert's weird. That's one of the reasons I like his movie or his book is that it's a weird version of sci-fi, right? Like he runs all of these hula hoops or jumps over through all these hoops to be able to create medieval feudalism in like a super future setting, and it's great. I love it, but it also has all these consequences that there is weirdness within the movie, and there's a lot of opportunity for things to go wrong with that much weirdness, that much um, backstory, and it being a movie, and they ride that line quite perfectly through the whole thing. You know, I think that what Dune truly is about, Frank, you want to know what Dune really is about?
No, I'm okay. We can move on. No, yeah, tell me. Tell me.
It's the it's the it's the Heisenberg uncertainty principle. And the idea, because this was what happened during that time period, was Heisenberg had the uncertainty principle, which essentially is like, okay, you try to measure something like an electron, but by the act of measuring it, you change the result. Right? So that is actually what Dune is really about. It's about Paul Atreides, who has influence and can see the future through the spice and his absorption of the spice. So he gets flashes of the future. Can he affect and change the future by seeing it, or does the act of seeing it necessitate that it winds up happening? So there's this weird look at that, and I think that Villeneuve does a really great job of actually making that one of the core themes of it, if that makes sense. Like it's really about that weird inner battle, which is a very difficult one to explain to people. Like it took me all that right there to get it out to the point of like, oh, that could be what it's about. But I really believe that that's what Frank Herbert's talking about in the book. It's what he's playing with as a concept. And I think Villeneuve does a really great job of making that accessible and interesting, even though it has so much opportunity to be boring and esoteric and hard to relate to.
It's gonna be, since you're gonna go see it again, it would be a great movie to see a second time because
Third time, actually. This will be my third time.
Oh, okay. I apologize. Because there's all this action that happens and there's actually good character development in this. So that's what you end up seeing on the surface, like the first time you go. And then the second time is always when you start to find those themes and those common threads throughout it.
Yeah. Like I now, when we went and saw it, did you think I had not seen it yet?
Yeah, I thought you hadn't seen it yet.
No, I saw it the day before, actually.
What? You asshole.
I didn't want to ruin our moment together.
I'm glad you didn't tell me.
I didn't want to ruin that, and I was already feeling a little sick. But to be fair, to be honest, I actually got convinced by a friend of mine to go the day before,
Oh,
and I was like, I really can't turn that down,
oh, that's so. It
and
makes
it'll
total
only.
sense from you. Because of how much you love Dune. Like I'm not surprised at all. I was actually surprised that you were willing to wait. Did you end up getting a bucket at least?
No, there was no buckets,
Because I was
and
surprised you
I don't
didn't
want to
ask
be
at
the
the
guy.
theater.
I don't want to be the weird guy who goes up and asks for a bucket.
There's been some great content about it. Tanya shared a video of it where it's like this guy walks up and he's like, I'll take the Dune bucket, but hold the popcorn and add lots of butter.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if this was a marketing flub or if it was like a happy accident that it wound up being as viral as it was. But whoever thought that up, that was like, I feel like somebody knew it was going to go viral and just was shocked nobody flagged it the whole time.
It's kind of like you and I talk sometimes about, any marketing's good marketing, sort of. We have this debate, but it's also like, oh, well, if this content isn't that great, like, okay, we know this content may not be great, or we know it may be controversial, but let's see what happens, And I totally agree. I bet somebody had the same thought, like, this might not go over well, but let's see what happens.
Yeah, let's see what happens. Just throw it out there. What's the worst that can happen? They're just people.
It's
Like,
just people. And
if they start talking about it, that's great. Controversy is a good marketing tactic. It doesn't mean you always need to be controversial, but if you're against the grain a little bit, which I think sometimes it's useful to be, you can, like, if everybody is saying this is the way to, hustle culture and all that stuff, and when we're doing something a little different than that, that's actually a good thing.
yeah. So, I mean, it's tricky. I wish there was more of a science that I knew about it, but I'd imagine that there's being controversial, but still being true to your message, I think takes a lot of effort. I think it takes a lot of refining to get there.
Well, well, I think you have to know your message and be standing on principles if you're going to be controversial. Like, you
Right.
can't be controversial with the intention of, like, I want attention, so I'm going to just be controversial. You have to stand on principles that actually give you a foundation in which to be controversial. I think that that's the only way to do it
Got to know what you
successfully.
stand for. Yeah.
Yeah, and because if you are just, if you're standing on something that really is a good point and it happens to be the counterpoint that everybody else is making, then you have a really good opportunity to use that as marketing fuel, because you'll be seen as somebody that's very firm ground and built their stuff upon something that just is different than what everyone else has built their stuff on. Whereas if you are like controversial for controversy's sake, where it's like, you know Dune sucks because Dune sucks, like, if you're just saying that and you're just saying, like, Dune is the worst movie that's come out in 25 years because
Oh
it's
God.
the biggest movie in America right now and I can't understand why. Here's a hot take from Chris's anti-movie
Antichrist.
flavor. No.
Versus Antichrist.
No, I'm not. Yeah, this is the Antichrist cast. The Antichrist cast where we demonize everything. All right.
Yeah. Well, let's
So
let's get back on a little bit of so Dune was nice. Thank you, Chris. I hope that was good for you. That was fun. That was fun.
Dune was a blast. I enjoyed seeing it for the second time with you and then
Oh,
getting
God
to experience
damn.
all those moments with you again for
Sloppy
the second
seconds.
time.
Thanks, Chris.
and laughing at the same time and talking about it afterwards like it was the first time, but it wasn't. It's great.
You're such an actor. Now I see the truth. It's terrible. Well, I wanted to take it in back into the direction of the con and talk a bit about the sales side of things. So we were talking a bit about the idea of what works well to get people to come up to your booth. And we talked about, engagement, whether it was taste testing or if it was just putting your hands on a product, because the hands on the product was probably the best way to do it. Not
You
everyone's
tried on that jacket.
Exactly. That's exactly where I was going to go. The jacket. So this guy didn't have any jackets to sell there. He just had their jackets and one of every size, and people would try it on.
And a mirror.
Unfortunately, the mirror was broken by
Oh
somebody
wait,
the day
yeah.
before. He said, And so he's like, so if you give me your phone, I'll take a picture of you so you can see it. It's a
Con
shame.
tip number 2: bring 2 mirrors.
Bring 2 mirrors. Yes, exactly. Yeah. Uh, and anyway, so that was really good. It was easy for me to try something on because he had one of every size. And so I could try on multiple sizes. So I think it's important that someone setting up a booth keep that in mind, that you need to have some interactive component. And even better to go a step farther if you want to have an immersive, even silly component, because there was another food place we saw where they made like barbecue, they made jerk chicken rub, they made spicy barbecue sauce. There,
They
everyone's
had
selling.
powder.
They also had powder that they made you try.
Yeah, they're
Hopefully that
like,
didn't contribute to your feverishness.
you're like, you can spread this on top of ice cream. I'm like, this is America. Oh my god! Like ice cream isn't sweet enough. You need to dump sugar on top of your ice cream. I'm like, this is insane. I'm from Canada. I don't think I can take this level of sugar in anything.
But they had their salespeople dressed up as pirates because that was their brand name. It was like something Bones, and it was it was interesting. It was a little silly. We had our discussion about it already. But what I liked about what they were doing was that they embraced this piratey essence, and that was really good. That was really good. So having that immersive component along with the hands-on tactile engagement is a good sales tactic. They didn't have to be great salespeople. In some cases, they really weren't, but they at least got you there and they were talking to you, got you to try it, and it was really easy for them to sell you on it.
What I also didn't see a lot of was, and this is why I think there's a real gap for Nerdpreneur to be here, because I think a lot of these nerds don't really understand or do business at a high level.
Mm-hmm.
I really think that if you were there, I didn't see a lot of people running incentives to get people to give emails, like signing up for
Yes.
newsletters, or hey, get a 10% discount on anything I sell at the con, or anything. Like, there was no sales that I saw that way. Even on the last day, must have been a good con, because sometimes you can. There was a few like comic books, like, oh, buy 5 for $10 or something. It was like you could sometimes get some good deals because comic places usually do that on the last day. But there was but I think there's opportunities for, like, oh, if you sign up for a newsletter, or if you do this kind of thing and you're interested in this kind of product, sign up for our email list, and you can go into a draw for this really cool thing that we're going to do. We're going to email everybody about it in the next week. So you don't have to come back for it. We'll mail it out to you. If you win, you win. But the value of getting 500 or 1,000 emails over the course of a 4-day con, how much is that worth long term? Because they're probably people that would be likely to want to purchase your products in the future. And then you could launch new lines, or you could let them know you're going to this next con and they'll come out and buy product from you. So I just felt like maybe I just didn't see it because I was feverish, but I didn't see a lot of that objective trying to get clients or potential leads from people down the road.
You're super right. The two examples that come to mind was first off, actually, we did not. It's not just your feverishness. We did not see really anybody actively acquiring email addresses. Now, I will say about the Star Trek jacket guy, because he is getting my information to ship it to me, an email address was asked
Well,
for, and that was
of course
part
they're
of
going
the
to get your.
process.
Yeah, you're going to get with that. You're going to get that with any client for sure. Most of the clients, if you bought something, they would send you stuff for sure. But even if but they but a lot of places didn't have even like an opportunity for me to give it to them free, right? Like, for example, if there was a chance for me to win one of those little wooden dice trays, and every one of those places that had wooden dice trays, because there was like 4 of them, right? Every place had something up for free. It's like, hey, we're giving away one of these for people at the con. All you have to do is sign up for our newsletter, and we send out promotions sometimes, but we mostly just give you discounts on things or let you know when new lines coming out. But if you want to win, we're going to be giving away one of these dice sets with the holder and everything all together for everybody who signs up. Would you like to do that? If you had that just going as people came up, then you keep them around the booth while they fill it out, so you can chat with them more. You can also then give them a chance to opt in, and then they might buy something, or they might buy something later. You now have a client or a potential client because they came up to your booth.
Now, I will say this is not something I saw at ECC either year, but I did see it at PAX. And PAX is people that go to PAX, I think, are spending, I don't know the numbers, but I assume they're spending almost twice as much to have a booth there, and they usually have a bit more experience. They usually know a bit more about what they're doing, and they will say, "Hey, you want to hear about updates on our game? Like, give us your email address. Like, you can't buy it, so we're here
Mhm.
getting emails and we're spreading the good word of our product, our game."
Yeah. Yeah.
So I think definitely, I think your idea of having like a raffle or even a 5% discount on their purchase there, you could do that, but then you start to actually bleed into your bottom line. It might be more cost effective to just do the raffle.
Yeah, one piece of product that, especially if you're selling physical products, I think that's a cool thing. Like Minis could have been doing this, or like, any of the dice manufacturers, retailers. Some of the artists, you might have had a hard time doing that, but like I could imagine maybe but even if you're just like that woman who was doing art, for example, that was all based around numbers and scientific
Oh,
numbers.
right.
Her name was Sienna Art Studios, and we both bought from her. She had really cool concepts for her art. We're probably going to get her on the pod in the future too. But I think that, imagine if like every time someone came up, they were like, hey, if you'd like to hear about new collections, sign up here, or like put your name in a hat or whatever it is, and then you can add them to your email list. All of a sudden, you just have 100 or 500 or whatever it is that you can then launch your next art collection to, or you can increase your profitability from this con just by letting us like, hey, post con sale on everything on the store, on the excess con merchandise, whatever it is that you didn't sell. We're going to sell it at 10% off. Anyone who wants to get it. Hey, you missed it at the con, didn't get back the third day, got sick or whatever. Like,
Or
if
you
you
got
get
sick
sick,
and you went
don't
anyway.
don't go to a con if you get sick, guys. If you get sick, you're supposed to stay home. And so that way, if you saw them on the first day, got sick and couldn't go back, well, then you could still buy something from them like a good person would. Stay home after they get sick.
Unless we didn't even touch on the fact that my house was freezing while you were here. It
Oh
was
my
it was
God.
a cold weekend, first off, and my house has some of the it actually my house actually does not have insulation. It's one of the problems.
Yeah.
And
And you, for some reason, turn the heat off. I don't
I
understand why you
turn the
would
heat
ever
off
do
at
that.
night because everyone's bundled up in a bed, Chris.
Oh my God. It's like, this is the same conversation I had with my girlfriend. It makes no sense. Hydro's not that expensive. Like, it just isn't that
Well,
expensive.
gas is pretty expensive.
Maybe gas heating is worse, but
Old
it's,
house. Old
yeah.
house issues. Yeah. But okay.
So the
So
shivering didn't help.
the shivering, I know. Trust me, man. I felt terrible when I saw you the next morning and you were all like in your layers. And I'm like, "Hey, good morning." You were like, "Okay, you're up." You just went back to get ready. It was funny. Um, yeah. Okay. So we talked about several sales aspects, and one of the other important things to talk about are the cost of a booth. Now, this is something that Chris and I were talking about. It's not easy to find how much people are charged, especially, say, in our specific scenario, Emerald City Comic Con. What they get charged not only is going to change year to year, but they don't just advertise their price on their website. You have to like email them
Yeah. Do you know why I think that is?
because it's expensive.
Yeah, it's a lot of money, I bet. I bet it's a lot of money. And they probably need to close. They're also probably collecting leads and then approaching the ones they want there first, so that they can be able to say, hey, oh, these people were here last year. They were great to work with. They didn't cause issues. Because I guarantee ECC is deconstructing what happened over the last 4 days. And they are probably saying like, ooh, this booth did great. We had no problems from them. People seem to be busy. They're saying how much money they made. They loved it, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. All these people, they're on our good list. And then there's the people that where they're like, oh, these people were jerks, or like, hey, we had 3 complaints about these people, that they were ripping people off, or that the art wasn't good, or their
Or they left a
products
mess.
broke, or they left a mess, or like, and that's another thing to consider, is that, you might show up to one of these cons, and if you aren't on their good list, they may not call you back to resell you another booth. You're always being interviewed, is something I got learned. Or, oh my God, I got
That was
learned.
nice.
Is something that I got taught and learned when I was younger. Is that when you're working in a company or working for a company or with a company, you're always being interviewed. And the people there are always looking to see, are you somebody that they want to continue working and building a relationship with? Because ECC does not have a problem filling that space with dozens and dozens of nerdy businesses that want to be there in their market and actually getting the access to that, right?
Yeah,
So
that's true.
keep that in mind as you go to these things, or if you decide to opt in. Sometimes, when you go into these things, always remember you're being interviewed.
I think so. First off, I love what you said, and that summarizes a feeling that I have a lot, which is you're essentially always being interviewed for something. But the the thing that I would recommend for people is if you're gonna go to a con like ECC and you're gonna go without having a booth, talk to the businesses there and maybe start to, I mean, that's what I wish I had done while we were talking to these people. I wish I'd asked them, how much did you pay for this? I would have been very curious to see if the prices were the same,
I would have been
floor to
curious if
floor.
they gave it to us, if they said it.
I bet they would have. Some of them we striked up some like good conversations and it felt very personable. Sometimes it
Well,
was very
we can
business.
dig in our interview with them
Yeah,
then.
definitely have to. But so I did pull one article that talked about this. Actually, it's a blog. So let's be clear here, folks. It's a blog. It's not an article, but it's from mrjakeparker.com. He's an artist. He apparently has some. He does a lot of comic book art, and this article is from 2020, so it's a little bit dated, but he explains some of the different cons he's gone to and whether it was worth it and the kind of revenue versus cost. And he says, my expenses for a show are between $1,000 and $2,000 depending on the amount of tables I get and what my hotel situation is. And then he goes on to explain profitability and what his gross takeaway was, and how at ECC he apparently does a lot better than other places. He'll gain like an additional sometimes $2,000 at just ECC compared to other places. So if we take that as a ballpark estimate, that his hotel for like a 4-day 3-day event plus the booth, like let's just assume that is a flat cut down the middle. So we're looking at like,
maybe $1,000.
maybe $1,000 for 4 days. I have seen.
That's not bad at all.
No,
I thought it'd be way more actually. That might be an art booth though.
maybe. Yeah.
I mean, is he an artist?
He
or
is. He is an artist. And I did
Yeah.
see other places that mention, and I can't find them right now, but I did see other places that say $470 a day.
Yeah. I mean, I could see that for some of the retail spaces, like the ones where people are going to buy. And art has got to be, I mean, they're much smaller booths first off, so they take up less space.
Right.
There's a lot more competition though, and it is also more narrow in terms of the interests. So you have to keep that all in mind. I bet it's less than $1,000 to get yourself a booth for art. I bet. But at the same time, positioning would probably be different. Like you could be back in the very back row, or you could be the first thing people see when they walk into Artist Alley. And so those will have different price points as well. It'll be based on where your positioning is. And you can have horrible positioning or you could have really great positioning. And some people were even saying, oh, we paid to be here. Like we wanted to, like the mystery box people, they paid to be the first thing you go in there and see.
Gotcha. Yeah, I mean, it makes sense that it would be priced a lot like a concert. This guy actually mentions in his blog that so he's making this argument for why he stops going to these cons because he saw over the 5 years that he's making less and less money. But he also said that there's a lot of other factors that could be contributing to that. And one of them he mentions is his position. Sometimes his position that he would pay for wasn't as good. Like he mentioned the Sky Bridge, which is this it's this in between. It is a through traffic bottleneck. It is not a destination like a lot of these rooms were that we went to. They were clearly large halls that were destinations. So taking that into account, just like you said, position really matters.
Yeah, it absolutely does. That's old trade show stuff that I used to worry about too, and you think about when you're successful, you think about Pixel that. Why do they have multiple locations? Because they clearly are profitable in one location. And then they said, well, what if we do a second one? How much more will we make if people don't have to come find us downstairs? There's a whole whackload of artists on Artist Alley that probably want to go see stuff there and never even walk the floor downstairs. I bet you we could sell stuff there. And you know what? I don't know what the answer is to that. It'd be great to find out if we talk to them. But I bet the answer was, yeah, we got to be on both floors. And it wound up making them more money. So they stuck with it. And I mean, you have to also factor in your cost of time, right? So remember, most of these booths had staff, and some of them might have couples that were working together and working for free together, right? To be able to execute the whole con themselves and be there long days. And that's a cheap way to do it. But then there's like the hot sauce people that had paid help, for example, and were giving away dozens and dozens and dozens of samples throughout the entire day. And so, and then there's uniforms, and then there's their hotels, and then there's their, so it can exponentially get much more expensive if you're bringing staff. So the thing I want you to realize is many of these places were making enough money after having staff, paying for their hotels, paying for their flights, paying for everything that I'm talking about. So immense amounts of profit can actually be made by the end of it. Like a lot of money was probably spent, but also a lot of money was probably made. And, maybe they wind up net gaining a little bit, but maybe the profitability isn't huge. It's actually just like maybe a few $1,000s. But the positioning of them being at ECC,
Yeah.
and being one of the artists or one of the big one of the big artists there, or one of the big model makers, miniature makers there, right? So being the positioning in your market, that's another thing that cons can get you, is like, oh, we were at PAX, we were at, Comic-Con, we were at these big events, and it legitimizes you, gives you positioning in the market if you're able to actually survive and do it at that level.
Yeah, something we didn't even talk about on this note of the value of even just being there is the atmosphere. Excuse me. The atmosphere of when you're there, it's so exciting to buy stuff. And I wouldn't have bought
To
that
find
jacket.
something, right?
Yeah.
It's like finding loot. You get to go through and find treasure that you love, and there's all this treasure around. And yeah, you're sifting through the junk and the wares and things that don't really matter.
Right.
But then you're like, oh my god, there's loot. Let me grab that. And
Yes.
you wind up buying it.
Yeah, especially if they make it a little bit of an incentive with like, oh, well, if you buy one, it's 35, but if you buy two, it's actually 60. And you're like, oh, I'm saving $10 if I buy two of these suckers. Like,
Yeah, show specials.
yeah. And for me, it was, so there was that was a really powerful tactic for the two of us, because you would show interest in something and you'd be like, hey, Frank, you should probably get one too. Like, find something that you like so we can get that discount. And you're like, do you want any of these? And I was like, well, I guess, yeah. And you were like, cool, get one, and then we'll both have one and it'll be cheaper. I was like, okay, that was easy. Like, Chris just sold me on their product. Nice work, Chris.
Exactly, right. And that's the other thing too, is if you have those multiple deals, people will conjoin together to get more stuff, right? That's the magical thing about sales.
Mm-hmm.
You want to have a better deal to spend more, always.
And the other thing that's really cool are mystery boxes. Now, I am not a huge sucker for it, but I did get suckered in on one of
What
them.
do you mean, man? Did you don't like a mystery box?
I am not. If I see a mystery box, I'm not like, oh my god, let me like really take a look and.
But it could be anything.
So I was actually pleasantly surprised with the.
Do you not have any childhood wonder?
No, I don't. I grew up at a very young age, Chris. But I did actually at the minis place. I was at $115 on my total, and they said, "Ooh, if you get to 125, you get a free mystery box mini." And I said,
Oh.
"Well, how do I get 10 more? How do I put 10 more dollars onto my bill?" I couldn't tell them how to add money faster, and they pointed out like, "Oh, here's some like small add-ons." There was one for $10. It was a little mimic, and I was like, "Yes, give me that shit now." And they put it in the bag, and I got to open it later, and I was really pleasantly surprised. My mystery mini was this badass looking barbarian veteran character. And I was like, oh, grizzled, like army hardened looking character. And I was like, I do not have that. That's great.
Mm-hmm. Have you ever played a barbarian?
Oh yeah.
Okay.
Oh yeah.
Well,
They're one of my favorite because they always get the plot going.
yeah. What's your barbarian's name?
Uh, gosh, who was I? It was probably Ron. Short
Ron the Barbarian?
Ron. He was an orc. It was short for Ront.
Oh,
Yeah.
because Bront is so long.
Exactly. Well, he was an orc, and so I was going off of stereotypical orc backgrounds, and he was
70,
great.
25%. I would say he would make the argument it was 25% shorter, but I don't believe a
He doesn't
barbarian's
do
smart enough to
percentages.
understand that.
Yeah, he didn't do percentages, but he definitely kicked down doors.
Well, now you have yourself a miniature for a Ront or a future Ront play.
Yeah, I could. I mean, this guy looked way too like actually he reminded me a lot of the general from Dune when you see him later and he's got like all of the facial hair and he's all grizzled, but you can tell
Mm,
he has like that soldier discipline.
mm.
That's what this mini reminded me of.
Right. Yeah, that would be Gurney Halleck, I
Thank
believe, is who you're
you.
talking about.
Yes. Now, to wrap all of this up, if there's any, I'm going to put this question out there. What other lessons would we like for the next year when we go? Because I'm planning for us to go and for neither of us to be sick. That's what's on my mind.
Well, I'm not going to look, I'm not going to like say what the lessons are. I'm going to go there looking for lessons and I'm going to pull them out of the genius of those who are already successful.
God, you're wise.
That is the way that I wanted it to go this year. But next year, we'll actually have some real content that can be filmed with people and make connections. And yes, I do think I should rap out loud for people while we're there and get them excited about hearing from us. So
You would make one hell of an impression if you rapped in front of people, especially if you did it like 20 times. You might be really freaking tired of it after the 5th time.
Oh, maybe, but also I feel like it would be. I just want the response or the reaction to people, almost like a do Nardwar, like a Nardwar style thing where there's just a little bit of weirdness to this, where you're like, what is this happening right now? What is this Nerdpreneur thing? I want it to be weird enough that people are like, huh, this is going to be memorable, but also something where they're like, this is kind of cool.
But yeah, executed with enough confidence that they're like,
and
okay.
skill. Yeah, no, I'm gonna rap well, and it's gonna sound good. And then they're gonna be like, that guy actually can rap. I wasn't expecting that. I definitely was not expecting these nerdy. I was just gonna talk about my nerdy business, but then that was like, I just feel like that would be really fun to kind of combine the unexpected with their interview, and then all of a sudden we get some interesting wisdom.
It would also be kind of on the subliminal level. It would be a great way to get them to relax about being on camera.
Yeah, and a little bit of like this, like a little bit of that Ali G flavor, like,
Yes,
booyakasha. And then all of a sudden you turn to them and be like, all right, what's up?
Yeah.
And so kind of, I do feel like there's opportunity to do fun stuff like that, where you deliberately misinterpret what people are doing or thinking or saying. That could also be a whole other angle we could do, but I don't want to piss people off either.
There's so much fun. I'm already thinking of like the camera angles for how this could work. It's great. It's great. Okay, so next year your plan is to go and meet some nerdpreneurs.
Yes, and get stuff on camera, some real content outside of just our regular podcast content. So hit follow, go find us on socials and follow, because we will be putting stuff like that out in the future. They're in the show notes. I'll just put them there for you. You should check our show notes. There's always cool stuff in there.
Yeah, always good opportunities to learn more information about us. And even, especially, the next time we go to Emerald City Comic Con, it would be fun to meet up with some other nerdpreneurs.
Yeah, absolutely. Especially after people we interview from this one. Look for that on the horizon, as well as we will be dropping episodes with some of these people as we reach out to them and get them into the schedule, because it will take a bit of time. But it is coming.
Totally. Well, thanks everyone. And Chris, as always,
keep it nerdy.